Thank you for staying here. I know there's lunch outside waiting for you, so we'll go through this as quickly as we can. But what we wanted to share with you today is what's happening in the state of digital health investment. Who are the major players investing in the space? Who are some of the VCs that are investing in the space? What kinds of deals are they doing? What kinds of companies are they backing? And what we think the future could be as well for 2025. This report is provided by Galen Growth using their technology, and I'll let Julien start it off with giving us some guidance of exactly how much you see and what data you collect, and then how we can go forward. So off we go, I guess.
With pleasure. It's going to be a gallop, though, because our 20 minutes are already 13 minutes.
Yeah,
It'll be a very quick gallop. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone who remained in the room rather than disappearing off to lunch. It's very kind of you to come and listen to some of the hard work that we've put in today. And as I say, I'm talking about the whole of the Galen Growth team, has helped produce this. This is an excerpt of a larger report that is an annual analysis that we do in collaboration with the Health Tech Forward team, where we really focus on who's been investing in digital health under the heading of trying to define who the core investors are. So to answer one of the questions you put to me, Ritesh, and that is that all of the data you'll see today and in the report and any other presentation that the Galen Growth team are giving at Health Tech Forward can be found on this platform called Health Tech Alpha and some of our analysis tools such as Alpha Edge. So I would recommend that everyone goes there to either download the report or to look at the data. For example, there's a full table of all the startups that are challengers during the course of this conference. Right, so very quickly, digital health, guys, quick definition. When we talk about digital health in this presentation, as well as all the analysis that we at Galen Growth do, we are talking about digital healthcare technology innovation, therefore the whole of the value chain.
Not just patients.
Not just patients. We're looking at drug discovery, we're looking at AI, or AI is everywhere, of course, and we'll come back to that. But there's a very long definition there, but I'll keep it very short. Basically, we're looking at the role digital healthcare technologies play across the whole of the value chain. Right. Let's look at quickly, for context, some of the investor overview. So it's an ecosystem of some 14,600 individual unique investors who have invested at least once in digital health or digital healthcare technology.
Is there a dollar amount or a money amount? Or
there is.
There
so
is. Okay.
There's two pictures on this slide. There's what you're looking at here, which is a Q3, so as at the end of 30th of September. The interesting point is that 2024 is seeing a resurgence of momentum in funding into digital health. There are a couple of caveats to that. So as at the end of September, it was 19.7 billion across 1,500 or so deal. But I would encourage you to look at where the little loudspeaker sign is here, and that is to say that, in fact, as at Friday, total funding in digital health is 23.2 billion globally. That means that we are on track to match at least 2023 and hopefully potentially exceed.
But not 21. Look at 61 billion.
Yeah, but 21 is a complete outlier. So, but if we can get back to what 2020 was or 2019 were, I think we're in a good place. But the good news is that we're seeing a resurgent momentum. And the even better news, which is kind of apparent on this slide, and that is that Europe is definitely ahead of the game. As at the end of November, Europe is ahead of last year already. Now, November was a very quiet month for deals.
Now, when you say Europe, these are funds that are based in Europe or funding occurring in Europe?
Very good question. So we look at the ecosystems through the lens of the startup.
Okay.
So what I'm talking about is any funding received by a startup founded in a European country. Okay. So it could be, as we'll see in one of the slides, that an investor is in fact a US investor and has invested in a European startup. That will count in the European funding data.
Right.
Yeah?
Okay. Yep.
So the good news is Europe is up. The globe is slightly up, and so it's a better year this year than it was last year.
Any prediction for year end?
Yeah, we think that the year end globally will match last year, may exceed a little bit. We'll see. Okay. It all depends on the number of mega deals that come through. So deals over $100 million in size. But certainly in Europe, it's ahead and will definitely crush last year in terms of total funding. This slide, though, is quite interesting because what it says to you is what we expect. If you look at the left-hand chart, funding has obviously been eroding since 2021. As I said, 21 is a bit of an outlier. And so that is combined with the amount of deal volume. So that's the graph on the left. But what's quite interesting is if you then correlate that to the graph on the right, that shows you the number of active investors in the same period. That has grown slowly, but the number of digital ventures founded each year has slowly gone down. Although remember that the chart on the right, the bar on the right is H1, so of course we'll probably match 2023 to some extent. So we are seeing an impact of that founding drought. However, if you look at survival rate, in other words, the number of digital ventures that were incorporated in that period that are still alive, you've got certainly a survivability rate of 93%.
So from 2020?
Correct. I'm talking about the ventures that were created in that period and have been raising funding in that period. How many of them are still alive? It's still 93%, despite the fact that there is a funding drought. And if you attend the presentation at 2 p.m. that my colleague is giving, looking at growth stage only, you'll get a sense of just how much of the ecosystem desperately needs funding was it hasn't raised in the last 18 months.
But there's a lot of money still available. It's just not getting put into the place from the sound of things.
So the investor value chain is constipated. There's no exits. IPOs are hardly existent. SPACs, forget. M&A there is, but 70 to 80% of M&A is venture to venture. So it's a really stuck machine, which means that nothing's going from left to right. And so if you don't have an exit avenue, you're really thinking hard about how you're deploying, which is why it's important to look at core investors, because it's important to understand which ones are the repeat offenders versus what I would...
One time only.
Well, you could call them tourists or whatever you want, absolutely, So if you look at where the money's going, you're seeing a slow decline in early stage, sort of move away from the high-risk type investment, and a favoring of growth stroke late stage ventures. Not immediately surprising, as I guess, when things get a little unsettling, there's a flight towards.
So let's define this from early stage. Early stage is C to A?
So for us, it's right up to Series A. That's how we include Series A in early stage these days. So it's anything from incorporation and first grant, let's say, all the way through to Series A. And then growth stage is B and C. And then from D onwards, we call that late stage. So that's a good question. That helps sort of define what that looks like. So anyway, so that's the context. Let me talk to you through the core investor analysis that we do, as I said, in collaboration with the Health Tech Forward team. It's really trying to understand who's in that top right-hand box. That's just deliberately provocative, that box, or that 2 by 2. Yes, well, you could call it various other things as you want, but there are a few investors out there that are throwing a lot of money at a lot of things. Not sure how good that is. But we're looking for the guys at the top right. In other words, the guys that are frequently investing, but also are creating portfolio growth. And I'll come back to that. So, the metrics, so the direct investment metrics, you would expect. So we're only looking at investments that took place between January 22 and the 30th of June 2024. We're looking at exits by those investors or by portfolio elements for those investors, as well as looking at some of the portfolio assets that they have that are reaching valuations that exceed 100 million. So that's the more direct investor type related metrics. On the right-hand side, we're looking at what we would call the more growth type factors. There's 2 pieces there that I think are worth certainly describing in a bit more detail. One's a partnership score. So as you know from your experience of the data, we track very closely what partnerships a digital health venture has created. That could be a commercial partnership, an academic partnership, a research partnership. So we are looking very much at those levels of partnerships because to us it's an indicator that the venture is growing, it's scaling, it's looking for ways to reach market, for ways to improve its clinical evidence, etc. But we're also looking at Alpha Score. Alpha Score is a proprietary score, as it says there, but really is looking at the maturity of the venture. Not the funding maturity, the actual maturity of the venture. What's it actually achieved?
In the market.
In the market, and in clinical evidence, what's it done in terms of fundraising, etc., in terms of the velocity of funding, etc. So we're looking at a whole bunch of stats that are entirely data-driven, so there's no opinion in there at all, and are saying to us, hey, this and this venture is performing better than that venture.
So if I've got a venture that gets approved through the FDA, let's say, that's a moment that says this venture is now clinically approved.
You will score a higher clinical evidence score if you've got greater regulatory approvals or you've got more peer-reviewed publications out there, etc. So absolutely, you're absolutely right. And that all contributes to that picture. And it enables you to be able to rank ventures on the platform, for example, or even to look at how that particular venture is performing versus its peer group, what we call the forecaster. That says, okay, that venture's got a score of X, but what does its peer group score as, and therefore is it above or below? Sorry, you had a question?
No, not at all. Keep going.
So if we go from that, and I'll skip a slide to come back, but now I know that the red button goes back. So these are the metrics, yeah? So we're looking at funding. So the guys have invested in that period of time. We're looking at those investors have actually had exits, and that could be M&A. In other words, someone's acquired the asset, not necessarily just IPO. We're looking at a third metric, which is, of course, valuation. We're looking at two further metrics. I just described the alpha score and the partnership score. What does that mean? That means that if you start with 14,672 investors globally, and you start applying those filters, you end up with less than half that number having actually invested in 2022. Yeah? Less than half the number, again, having actually invested more than 3 investments in that period of time. And then continue applying the methodology, you end up with 488 core investors. In other words, those that have consistently engaged and that could create a significant contribution to their portfolio going forwards.
Okay.
So those are the guys that I think if you are an LP, but more importantly, if you're a startup, you should be talking to these guys.
That's the guys you want to talk to.
Because you'll benefit the most by talking to them. It doesn't mean the others aren't good. It just means that you'll probably end up better bang for your buck going down.
Bigger value.
Yeah, I think so. So let's look at some who's who in the zoo, shall we?
Yep.
So we're in Europe, so we thought we'd look at Europe first. Yeah, and so if we look at Europe through those particular metrics, you end up with Sofinnova Partners as your...
Anybody here from Sofinnova?
I have no idea, actually.
No?
Doesn't
You
look...
should have been here. Where are they?
Yeah. So that's Sofinnova.
Yeah.
And then along the right-hand side, of course, it tells you what quartile they're sitting or whether they're in the top 10 in relation to those. But you're not surprised to find it's third quartile or above, largely because they are a winner for Europe. And that's just looking at investors that meet those criteria, but on top of that have invested in a venture in Europe. Yeah? They just happen to be, of course, based in Paris as well. So if we look at their portfolio very quickly, conscious of time, in that period of time, 15 deals, 1 exit, and a 3-to-1 ratio of partnerships versus investees.
But look at the interesting industries there.
Absolutely. That's the interesting thing about Sofinnova. They're very focused on what we call tech bio. So it's about omics, it's about bioinformatics, it's about drug discovery, and then you get into medical imaging, telesurgery. Interesting thing missing there is there's no patient solutions on that. It's all other types of bets. So it's quite interesting. It doesn't mean that's why they're there. It's just interesting to see what bets they're placing. Yeah? And then the rest of the field was this lot. Worth pointing out, for example, Kostler. I know. But that's why we're looking at investors that are investing in Europe-founded ventures.
Mayo is quite...
Mayo's been very active.
They've dropped off?
Well, they're not technically a pure VC, Mayo. Mayo Clinic is a health system that, as you know, has got a number of things, including an accelerator, a venture arm, etc. So we would put them in the more the health system bucket. But you're right, it's a good question. But if you look at pure venture capital, that is the lay of the land as far as core investors into European founded funders. And of course, a lot of other US guys there.
Now, can your data go deeper into who Kostler's invested in?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. No, so if you go into the platform, you look at who Kostler's invested in all over the world, and then you can obviously do all sorts of slicing and dicing of the data, looking at all of the key metrics.
MassMutual is the other one, right?
Yeah. Well, they do have representation in Europe, MassMutual. Okay. So, but you're right, it is a US investor, etc. The interesting thing in terms of European, of course, the other one there is Debiopharm. Yeah. And I know Debiopharm is in not the room, but they're certainly here.
Here, okay.
I've seen them listed.
We'll go find them.
Yeah, so the scores on the right-hand side gives you an idea of how we arrived at it. In terms, you end up with an investor score by the time you look at all those metrics. So 47 seconds left. Let's look at the titans, the 12 that made it through, because I think you'll find some really interesting names. So we took 12 categories, and we then segmented the data of those 488 investors and broke it down into some categories. Some of them regional, and some of them by specific categories, and some really interesting names pop up. So, 3 stage level categories, 3 regional level categories, and then we decided to look at, of course, some of the more specific digital health type categories in terms of hot topics, let's call them that. A lot of US, as you would expect. It's the largest ecosystem, etc. But I really like what we're seeing, some Asia bubbling through there. So, Health Quad, which is a digital health VC arm of Quadria Capital, which is a big PE firm based out of India/Singapore. EDBI, which, as you know, is a Singapore government vehicle, kind of, I guess, the EIC of Singapore.
It's interesting to have Fidelity there, though.
It is, absolutely. And it's interesting that, again, a bit like Sofinnova, they're very focused on the drug discovery side. in terms of their investments over the last few years.
What's interesting here is not much on what we would call the digital therapeutic or the digital patient stuff by the look of things.
So it's
Right?
a fascinating question. Unfortunately, we haven't got much time to but if you look at the centers of gravity that have been shaping in the last 12 months in digital health, not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of the partnerships being built, we're seeing a number of things. But health systems big, and we heard the last panel talking about that at some length, and we, of course, as you know, we talked about that in Amsterdam last June. So there's a lot going on there. But pharma, for example, is really moving towards two things. One, R&D, how to optimize productivity in R&D. The other is what we would call patient-centric new business models. Lilly Direct, Pfizer for All, OPH, for example, is a new model in that direction as well. From Otsuka, for example, Astellas has launched a new model, and of course AstraZeneca, as we know, has got Evidata. Evidata. So you're seeing some really new models coming through to leverage the building blocks that digital health is bringing to them, but no pure DTX by itself. You're absolutely right.
Fascinating. Also, General Catalyst is missing on this one.
Correct, and it might be because they sit in one of those other boxes.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, we're out of time, I'm afraid. So
No.
thank you very much.
This was